All right, we are back. Welcome back to the outside of the 2K booth. We are here with Corey, and we're going to be talking about Spec Ops, which you can see behind us. This huge destroyed bus is part of our Spec Ops The Line booth, the part that's visible to the public. So Corey, why don't you start off by introducing yourself and what you do on the game?
So I'm Corey Davis, and I'm the lead designer of Spec Ops The Line, and I'm just really excited to be here to show you guys some new stuff, especially this bonus content that we've got today to talk about a little bit.
All right. First of all, for people that don't know, what does a lead designer actually do on a game? You know, there's a lot of people, game development is kind of a mystery. So what does lead designer mean?
Yeah, game development is definitely a mystery. Sometimes I look back and I wonder how we get these things done. But basically, my job really evolves throughout the project. So at the start of the project, I'm really involved with a lot of discussions trying to set the creative direction for the project, trying to make sure that we're hitting on the goals that we have and that we really understand what those are and that they're well defined for the team. Because that's the most important thing, is that as we move into full development, the whole team really has a grasp of what we're trying to accomplish, that they're on board with it, that they can feel ownership for it, that we can express that very well, and that we don't have turmoil within our internal group that's trying to set the direction for the game. And so there is a lot of debate, there's a lot of controversy on our teams at the start of projects because we each have our own ideas of how things should go. So I'm basically the guy like directing those conversations, making sure the right people are involved with the right parts of the project, trying to empower those people, and then throughout development, basically taking a look at the game as often as I can and looking for things that I can improve, making sure that we stay on track, making sure that vision stays solid for the product as we move forward. And then, anytime I can get my hands dirty with even jumping in the editor or, fine-tuning things in the game, I love to do that as well. Don't always have time to do that, it depends on the project and the stage of the project, but that's really exciting for me as a lead designer.
That sounds like an extremely important position when you put it that way.
Well, it's stressful, definitely, but it's also very, very interesting. I love having these conversations, especially with people that care about the products that we develop. With Spec Ops The Line, it's definitely been that way the whole time because we're touching on these universal themes of like, what is the soul of man? What happens to us as human beings when we make certain decisions in order to better our situations in life, and what happens to us later on? How do those decisions affect us? And then throwing into the mix a lot of really sort of touchy topics that may be controversial to some people, but we didn't want to shy away from those things during development of Spec Ops Line. So we always really encouraged an open discussion about anything that we were going to do in the game, because we wanted to touch those things with care, not just put things in the game for shock value or because they're cool, but they needed to have that really strong context behind them that's driven out of the vision of the project and the goals that we have as developers.
All right, we were talking about definitely some grandiose topics here.
Definitely.
For people that are just tuning in and may not be familiar with what Spec Ops The Line is, can you just kind of give like what's the top level, what is this game? What kind of game is it to begin with?
Yeah, so as you can probably see from some of the screenshots and stuff like that, Spec Ops The Line is a third-person military-themed shooter, but it's a lot different than what you probably expect because it's got this twist of the fact that we're following these three characters that go into the heart of darkness in a very surreal environment, which is Dubai, after it's been struck by cataclysmic sandstorms and rendered a no man's land. And so our squad goes in on a rescue mission, and we actually build a very strong, intimate relationship with these characters, and we see how their relationship changes and evolves as they go through some very horrific situations because they're actually cut off from command. They're forced to rely on each other in the training that they have, and the player actually gets to get his hands dirty with a number of these really sort of difficult gray area scenarios and make decisions in the shoes of Captain Martin Walker.
So what was it that kind of made you want to go down this path of making this game? Like you talked about, people may expect a particular thing from a modern military-themed shooter because there are a lot of them out there, but this one is so different. What made you go, what, we're going to do that, we're going to do something that a lot of people have tried, but we're going to do it better, and focus on the story and all these things that you're talking about?
Yeah, well, basically, there's great games in the genre. There really are. I'm a big fan of the games that are out there. I don't have to name names. You know which games I'm talking about. But really what those games do extremely well, we didn't have to do because, we really want to do something different. And our take on this was that as gamers, we have matured. I think we've gotten to the point now where it's time for us to start contemplating, deeper topics and subjects and themes that are important to us in our lives, not just because they're fun. but because they're actually meaningful to our day-to-day experiences that we have as human beings. And so as developers, I see a lot of developers actually moving in the direction where they want to talk about things that are meaningful to them in their games. And to us as a group of people, maybe we're just strange, twisted people or something, I have no idea. But we really wanted to find out what it's like to be a soldier in these modern conflicts. What is it like to make decisions that, you're called there to make. But at the same time, it's not a right or wrong decision. There's always these gray areas. And soldiers really have to live with that for the rest of their lives, those decisions they make on the fly, on the battlefield, with unknown outcomes. So it's very, very difficult. And as we did our research, we actually started with the Heart of Darkness. That was very impactful to us. But as we went further, we started talking to military experts, started reading a lot of stories from soldiers on the modern battlefield. And we really wanted to do what films like Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket, The Deer Hunter, and Platoon, all these great films that really take the emotional side of what soldiers go through very seriously. We wanted to do that for games because I feel like we really got the heroic side down. We've got the action side down. We really feel powerful in a lot of these shooters, which is awesome. But when we have that context behind it, we build a strong relationship with the characters in the game. When things happen to those characters, you really feel it deep down inside. And we want you to contemplate throughout this experience about this evolution the characters are going on and the one that you're going on personally as you play the game as well.
All right.
That's really awesome. Actually, not only is this going to be different for a military shooter story-wise, with all the emotion and gripping detail for each character, you want to, be in touch with each one. What about the gameplay? I know the gameplay is going to be just a little bit different than your normal military shooter out there.
Yeah, well, it starts off with the fact that we're third person, the fact that we actually see these characters go through these scenarios. But on top of that, our setting is amazing. It's Dubai, like I said, which is one of the most beautiful, spectacular places on Earth. If you haven't been there, basically anything you can imagine is probably being constructed right now in Dubai, and then some. They've ratcheted it up to 11, everything that they're doing. To me, Dubai is our modern day Giza Plateau. This is where the most amazing projects on the planet are happening. 1,000 years from now, people are going to wonder how the hell Dubai existed, or exists, hopefully.
Because it almost looks like it's in the middle of the desert or something like that.
It is. It just sort of sprung out of the desert. They created a man-made oasis there. Even 10 years ago, it didn't exist. So as far as level design goes, that is a huge advantage for us. We get to do really great, interesting architecture in our levels. We've created cover systems to be able to work with really intricate placement of pillars, art pieces. So you're really going to be moving really fluently between these cover objects. That's really exciting for us.
Good.
Also the vertical gameplay that's provided by that architecture. So you're firing at enemies that are up on glass roofs and causing them to crash through into the environment. You're able to lean seamlessly over cover objects and fire down at a really steep angle.
That's really cool.
So that's really a lot of fun. Also the sand really comes into play in the game as well.
Right, the sand. I was going to ask you about that. Dubai is just, surrounded by sand, and I know that's going to play a really, really big part in the gameplay.
Yeah, so we've essentially taken this idea of sand in Dubai to a hyper-real point here, I think, and that's the fact that it's been filled with millions of tons of sand to the top of skyscrapers, buildings completely covered. And so you may be walking on a sand dune, but you're actually walking on a glass roof on top of a skyscraper, you don't even know it. Wow. So there's always this element of unsure ground, but at the same time you can use that sand to your advantage. So you can throw frag grenades into the sand, kick it into the eyes of enemies, stun those enemies, things like that. And then the squad will react to that as well. We have the chance to fight within the brutal sandstorms that continue to rage within Dubai. So they're really sort of ravaging the landscape. They're tearing apart the skyscrapers. They change the way the battlefield's laid out. They change the tactics that the enemy AI uses as well, as they're really sort of trying to pinpoint your location, and their communication breaks down as well. They're trying to look for your muzzle flashes. So as you're firing your weapon, if you're just running around, running and gunning during the sandstorm combats, they'll surround you. They'll outflank you.
So you really got to think about your strategy when these sandstorms happen. It's not just there just to make things look pretty on the screen, obviously.
Definitely.
You really need to think about what you're doing.
Yeah, and there's also other opportunities. You may be inside of a hotel lobby where if you look around, the windows are actually piled high with sand because the building's covered.
Okay.
You can shoot those windows and cause sand to rush into the environment and crush enemies that are there with all those tons of sand. So lots of really cool interactive ways to use the sand. We wanted the environment to come alive for the player, and the sand really is a character for us. In Spec Ops: The Line, the sand is our river. That's our Heart of Darkness river that we go down.
Sand is our river.
Yep, through this road in Dubai, Sheikh Zayed Road, which actually is a line that goes straight through the center of Dubai. We follow that as a landmark throughout this experience, and we want the setting to become a character for you and to really come alive, because it's what influenced all of the actions and the scenarios that you're seeing as a gamer in the narrative in Spec Ops: The Line.
Very good. I like that.
Thank you.
Exciting.
So here at E3, what is it that you are showing off? I mean, the game it's almost out. The game comes out June 26th in North America, and then June 20...
I believe 9th.
9th internationally.
Yeah.
And so what is it that you guys are showing off, both out here and behind closed doors to the press?
Yeah, so we've got, actually our demo's out right now on the Xbox 360 and the PSN.
That's right. It's coming out on PC June 12th. I'm almost positive that date's right.
Yeah,
we announced it recently.
And so we're showing that off for people who haven't had a chance to play that yet, but we're also showing some brand new content, which I'm really excited about. We're showing a level from later in the game, which actually takes place in a ship's graveyard. So it's on the coastline of Dubai, near the Palm Islands, where actually the sand has filled up this entire yacht area and has turned all these yachts on their side, these multi-million-dollar yachts with all this amazing architecture they provide. And so you're sort of like creeping through these really strange structures that are half buried in sand, looking for one of your squad mates. There's a very interesting narrative moment that happens here as you get separated from your squad, but there's an evolution in the characters that's evident in this level. You're going to see much, much different interactions in this level between these three characters, these squad mates, than you would at the start of the game. The way they look, the way they move, the way they speak to each other, the banter they have back and forth, it's completely different. Their perspective on the reason why they're there and their mission and whether or not they still should be there or what they should do has completely changed. So like the characters, you sort of, me personally playing the game, I fall in love with these characters, and that sort of changes a lot as I get further on, and I'm evolving with them as well. So I'm really excited to show that level. It's also, great opportunity for sand gameplay. You'll see the sandstorms and things like that in there. But also, we're showing some free bonus content. This is something we just announced 2 days ago, and I'm really excited about it here for E3. We're showing off for the first time co-op in Spec Ops: The Line. So you're going to have the chance to embody some characters that tie into the single-player storyline and see things from a different perspective, which is
so it's a different storyline that you get to play co-op to fill out the story.
It's actually a prequel to it's things that are happening before Captain Walker arrives in Dubai. So when you arrive as Martin Walker, everything's sort of being revealed to you, and you meet a lot of different factions there and things like that. In this co-op experience, this bonus content, you can go back and actually play some of those characters and see how they ended up where they are in the single-player game and what happened with them. Also, the combat's a lot different. The level design's a lot different in these co-op missions. We've really provided opportunities for you to support each other as a squad, and that's a lot of fun. So you may be like covering someone on a turret as they're rushing below, taking out enemies beneath you. You may be sniping or like even going after objectives like trying to take out one of Conrad's highest ranking officials. You also get to play as refugees that are trying to escape some of Conrad's internment camps. So you really see a lot different take on what the narrative is in Spec Ops: The Line, not just from the perspective of our main characters, but from some of the ones that you meet later on in the single player as well.
And speaking of that co-op, in less than an hour, we are going to be showing off on our live stream a direct feed of that co-op gameplay. We're going to be showing the entire demo that is being shown behind closed doors to press only. Even if you are here at the show, unless you could get one of the ever elusive press slots, you wouldn't be able to get to see this, but we're going to bring it to you. We're going to have a feed of both screens. You're going to get to see the whole thing.
It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be really exciting.
It's gonna be great.
Well, I'm excited for everybody to see it. We always wanted to do co-op, but our focus was on single player.
And a lot of people have asked. Every time we
But-
post a new trailer and stuff, there are at least a few comments that are like, is it going to have co-op? You know what? I love co-op.
Yeah,
so
it's great.
That's awesome for me, too. You were talking about Walker and his squad mates.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little more insight into who are these people that are
Sure.
going into Sandstorm Ruined Dubai? Why are they going there? And just who are they?
So Captain Walker and his squad, they're Delta Force operators, and Captain Walker is the squad leader. But with him, alongside him, is Adams, who's a demolitions expert and a short-range combat expert, and also Lugo, who's the young guy on the squad, but he's also the translator. He's very intelligent, and he's a sniper. And so you actually get to control these squad mates with some squad commands that we have. They'll intelligently make decisions based on attack targets that you give them and things like that. You'll see Lugo pulling out his sniper rifle and really taking out long-range enemies. You'll see Adams tossing in explosives or pulling out his shotgun when it makes sense to clear out enemies that are outflanking you that you've given attack commands for. And so you really get to interact with them as well. They're not just a narrative tool. That's where they come from first and foremost. But what's cool is as you get interactive with these squad mates, as you give them squad commands and things like that, the way they react to those evolves throughout the experience as well. So their character evolves, and the way that they speak to you and the way they react definitely evolves as well. So we wanted to sort of tie all of those elements together for the player. But really, the squad arrives and they're friends, basically. They're professionals. They've been on a mission together in the past. They also know the man that they're going in to bring home, or at least our main character does, Martin Walker, from a previous mission. So they have a lot of respect for this man. It was one of the reasons why they chose to go on this mission. Actually, Delta Force aren't forced to go on any mission. They can choose the missions they go on. They come in with the equipment that they've prepared and customize themselves. So they're really the pros of the military operations that are going on in the world. And so they come in actually on a rescue mission. And so it's not that they're going in to take out someone or some target or something like that. They're going in to see what's gone on with the humanitarian effort. What happened to all the people that were there? What happened to this man Conrad, who they had so much respect for before they went in? And once they get there, they start to find that there actually are survivors in Dubai. There's been a civilization that's cropped up there. Somehow, some twisted things are going on, and there's this element of mistaken identity that seems to be like pervasive in everything that's going on. The squad finds themselves in the middle of a civil war that's going on there between the factions that have sort of risen out of the dust from the sandstorms, trying to survive. And so the squad's trying to communicate with those around them, but the people don't trust them. They have no reason to trust them. They're there to survive. They shoot first, ask questions later. And so our squad sort of gets trapped into this mess, actually, and tries to unravel it. Tries to unravel the mysteries that are there and find out how Conrad could possibly be involved with all the twisted things that they're seeing in Dubai. And they're forced to make some decisions before knowing exactly who's involved with these different factions and why they're doing what they're doing. And so it becomes very tense and interesting for the player as well. But as they get further and further along, that relationship changes. It really devolves. It really goes in an interesting direction. Like I mentioned before, the squad mates, their perspective on things totally changes. And as you're making decisions, they're not necessarily going to agree with you. They're not going to agree with each other. They're going to present their own points of view. And those things really we tried to express as strongly as we could throughout the development of the game.
Speaking of which, so when a player sits down to play Spec Ops: The Line, I assume that you have some sort of feeling that you, not that you want to force them to experience, but what is it that you expect that they will like get out of Spec Ops: The Line? You know, when they play, obviously without spoiling anything.
Sure.
At least, what do they get out of it in the beginning?
Yeah, well, what I would say is that I hope that people are interested in seeing what a shooter can offer outside of just the gung-ho, heroic side of military combat. I really hope that they're interested in looking for the more subtle, emotional, and psychological aspects of this game, because that's where our focus has been since the start of development. And so I'm really, really excited that people can get their hands on that they can interact with that in a new way. And I hope that going forward, as developers, we're able to do this more and more. Like I said, develop and work on things and themes that we care about as human beings. And I hope that we've treated these things with care. That's the thing that's been very, very important to us throughout development. We had 16 different nationalities working on our team, bringing international perspectives to these things. And so I hope that you get sort of a different feeling than you do from other shooter games that are out there, just because we put so much care into those certain themes that are meaningful to us.
For sure. Well, I know that in Spec Ops: The Line, compared to other games that are more global, this one just takes place in one place. So who are you going up against as the main character?
Yeah, that's one thing that's really cool about Spec Ops: The Line, actually, is that we don't change timelines, we don't change perspectives, except for the co-op that we're releasing later.
Right.
But in the main campaign, we really stick with these characters in this environment in a seamless timeline. And so we arrive at one point of the day and we progress through the game without missing any of the experiences that they've had. So we really get to see everything that they go through and put our hands on it. But when they arrive in Dubai, they actually expect that no one has survived. They suspect that this signal
barren
that's there,
wasteland, basically.
yeah, the signal that they heard was just left behind and somehow has reached the outer edges of the city. And they go in just expecting to find corpses, basically. So they arrive, but when they get there, all of a sudden they sort of get the feeling that someone's watching them and following them. there's this really tense moment when the squad starts to realize that they're not alone.
Right, and you see that in the demo.
Yeah, that's
right?
actually in the demo that we've
Good.
released.
Yeah.
But you'll see that like the first people that they meet are already hostile to them because of events that have happened in the game or in this universe that the squad is not aware of. So they don't know why these survivors would be hostile to American soldiers. But instantly they're fired upon. They're basically thrust into a war that they didn't want to be involved with, that they didn't even know was going on. And that they assume that their command doesn't even know what's going on.
Oh, gosh.
So basically the civilians that are there have found a way to survive. They've armed themselves, and the squad ends up fighting them. But as they do, all of a sudden they get contact from the U.S. military, the battalion that was stationed there in Dubai. So of course they want to find them and question them. Well, as they do, they basically come across these two factions battling each other. The U.S. military that was there and the refugees that have armed themselves. They get caught in the crossfire.
Almost like a civil war
Yes,
in a way.
it is definitely. It's almost like a civil war. But then there's a few other factions that get involved right at that moment that you really don't expect to be there at all. There's some conspiracy going on here. There's some cover-up going on here. They're trying to get to the bottom of it. They don't know how it could possibly be happening behind the storm wall that's surrounding the city. But there's definitely some interesting characters that are on the ground there in Dubai, still alive, still functioning somehow. And these factions, they're really sort of key to those narrative moments that come up later on. So I don't want to spoil this for you. But I'm really excited for you to see how those interact and how they unravel.
Right, so the story is just huge.
Yeah,
it seems like
it's everything to us.
Yeah,
It really drove all the decisions we made, like as far as which levels we developed, how we developed the technology, because we wanted to make sure you don't see loading screens in the game, for example, so you're not pulled out of this experience, so that you really have an emotional experience and an intimate experience with these three main characters especially.
That's great. So we have, a single player mode, we have a co-op mode. Are those the only modes available on this game?
No, definitely not. We're a military shooter.
Great.
Multiplayer is very, very important.
That's what everybody wants to know, right?
Yeah. So while our focus has been on single player, I think the single player aspect of this game gives a lot of great context to the multiplayer as well.
Awesome.
So in multiplayer, you're actually playing as Conrad's battalion versus this faction called the Exiles.
Okay.
And the Exiles were a faction that actually defected from Conrad's regime. Because they wanted to go home. They wanted to give up.
They're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Conrad was not going to let that happen. He was not going to let them betray him and their loyalty to him.
He's very headstrong, this Conrad.
I guess so. But essentially, they begin battling in Dubai, and so you've basically got special forces officers that are battling a rogue special forces unit that actually are familiar with each other and the type of tactics and weaponry that they use. Those guys, that faction that you play in multiplayer, the Exiles, you'll actually see them strung up from lampposts and things like that in the single-player game. So those dots all connect. But our multiplayer is really interesting because it's a lot different than a lot of the other multiplayers out there. First of all, it's third person, like I mentioned before.
Right.
But it's very intimate. It's a 4 versus 4 multiplayer.
So only 4 versus 4, correct? Can you have 2 versus 2 if you wanted to?
No,
or
you
is
can.
It?
You
Okay.
can, but max,
up to 4.
Max 4 versus 4. We really made a conscious decision to really focus in on like I said, an intimate squad-based multiplayer combat experience.
So a lot of strategy is going to go into this,
I'm
assuming.
Strategy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not just, getting shot in the face from someone you don't see 1,000 times and then swearing at the screen.
I do that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you may be swearing at the screen. I can't promise you that.
Right.
But I think you're gonna be able to really tell who it is on the other faction that you're fighting against. You're going to really need to think about your squad and how to really set up your loadouts and your perks and all of those things that we've provided for you to be able to play tactically as a squad.
Cool.
And to me, at least, it feels like a much different military shooter multiplayer experience. I think it's exciting. It's a lot of fun. Also, the sand is involved in the multiplayer as well.
Oh, sand. Sand comes right back again.
Yeah, definitely. So
Very cool.
You see the sandstorms, the sand avalanches, the sands getting kicked up in the air from frag grenades and all of that in multiplayer as well. And that's a lot different. Playing against, your friends and real human players in the middle of sandstorms is really interesting, the type of tactics you can use and things like that.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited about that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We've played, the competitive multiplayer around the office
cool.
quite a few times. I got to say, one of my favorite elements of it is those sandstorms. The number of times we've been in a situation where there's like kind of a firefight stalemate going on. Both teams have hunkered down. They've got their tactics figured out. They've kind of closed up so they can't be flanked, and then all of a sudden a sandstorm comes and it changes everything. Because when a sandstorm is there, your accuracy is horrible at long range because you can't see, and all of a sudden people can sprint past enemy lines and they may not even notice you go past, and it just you've got to make sure that you're prepared for that happening, and sometimes it can be impossible to be, and you just got to like keep it in mind.
Yeah, it really changes. Actually, there's parts of the levels that change because of sandstorms as well. Areas may get filled up with sand, buildings may collapse, things like that. So there's a lot of dynamic stuff going on because of the sandstorms themselves. It definitely affects the combat. I really enjoy playing those as well.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end here. We're actually going to go into showing the Spec Ops gameplay that we showed yesterday with Sasha and Corey. And so when we come back from that, we're going to be piping into the co-op behind closed doors demonstration, where you're going to get to see the first time co-op completely live on our channel here at E3.